friendships go through seasons as well. Like there are people I know that I met at a certain stage and they are some of my best friends because we share these core memories. If you met them later in life, would they have automatically been a person I become friends with?
It comes back to that broken bone thing, isn't it? Like you break a bone in your body and they can set it and repair it. But, and this is someone who's had 3 surgeries on my knee, it's repaired and it is strong. I remember the physio saying to me, it's probably stronger now than before, but you've lost trust in it because your knee has failed you.
Yeah.
In the most painful way possible. You don't put as much force into the knee as you used to. You don't jump the same way.
Yeah.
You land slightly differently. And I think it's the same thing in a friendship is that yes, it's repaired. And yes, maybe greater trust, maybe because you've had the deep conversation. But then once you're put into a stressful situation, you don't put as much force into the friendship as you would have because you're like, oh, maybe, can it tolerate it? Will it bring up this? It's like these little niggles,
Yeah.
you know?
And as hard as that is, you're reminded of that. So the stakes, the investment to repair can be also lower. And then you look at things with the benefit of hindsight and experience and you sort of say, well, if I look at the trajectory of the relationship and I can look back to some of the early red flags, maybe it was always fundamentally flawed and this was just a sort of lesson, but a beautiful one in many places.
Roots and Rigour, Rigour and flow. Roots and Rigour, Rigour and flow. Roots and Rigour, Rigour and flow. Rigour and flow.
One.
Welcome back to Rigour and Flow.
With me, Aiwan.
And me, Tamanda.
The show where business meets love.
And culture meets critique.
So, before we get started, we have a new way for you to support the show. And it is called Buy Me a Coffee. And the link is in the description. If you can afford to, a monthly subscription is amazing, or a one-off donation would be amazing. It helps to keep the show going and sustainable. If you can't, don't worry. You're going to get the same show as everyone else. But we would ask that you share the show with someone you think would love to listen.
Yes, and also thank you so much to all of you who have generously bought us coffee so far. We've had
appreciate you.
Incredibly generous support, so we appreciate it.
Absolutely. This week, it's a part 2. So it's a continuation of what we were talking about last week, which was adult friendships and friendship breakups.
Which, by the way, I feel like is very apt because we just celebrated International Women's Day.
Absolutely.
And
I think of it as International Women's Month. I'm claiming the whole month of March.
I'm claiming every month of the year.
That's
frankly.
true.
Like we dedicate all of our show, all of our episodes to women. What are you going to do?
Exactly.
So this is just another excuse to say that explicitly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like the subject of friendship is a really interesting one when you think about it from a women's perspective, because it's like there's this whole narrative of the sisterhood that you're always sort of upholding, and some people believe in it, some people believe it's a fantasy, some people believe it's a lie, whatever else. So I feel like this is a good time to be talking about the sisterhood and friendship from that kind of angle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think last week we were focusing on my story of a friend that I gave the alias Belinda to. So it was a tale of betrayal, envy, jealousy, broken trust, lack of happiness for my achievements because of said envy and jealousy, a romantic affection that was not reciprocated by me for a whole bunch of reasons. Mainly, I saw her as a sister and a family. Her family was my family. She was my family. That's how I saw her. So I never really saw it in that way. So it was a tricky friendship to navigate. And we talked a little bit about how it ended and the breakup. So that's like a brief recap. It was
pretty intense, wasn't it? I mean, how are you feeling?
I mean, I'm feeling fine. As I said at the top of that episode, I've largely processed that point in my life. So for me, it's really just almost like telling the story of the thing rather than feeling the thing, if that makes sense.
Okay. At the end of last week's episode, we obviously acknowledged that the story you told was obviously necessarily one-sided. And that got us to a different question, which is the theme for this week, which is, have you ever been the toxic party in a friendship or contributed to its downfall? So obviously, I know with Belinda, that was not the case. But in general,
She might not think that.
she may not think that. We'll come back to that, how she would narrate it actually. But before we do that, in general, would you say that you are a good friend? And can you think of any other friendships where you may have been toxic or difficult?
It's a tricky one with friendship. And for those who listen to the show regularly, you'll be quite familiar with my background in the church. So it's like I grew up in a very Christian, fundamentalist, Pentecostal community, Nigerian community in London. Growing up in that community, my understanding of friendship was very much informed by my mum on the one hand, and the church and the scripture on the other hand, right? So the conditioning in the church was that friendship in a certain context is good and godly and right. You know, we often had the example of King David and his best friend Jonathan as an example of like a friend that sticks closer than a brother. And that's actually a verse in the Bible, right? And so it was encouraged that, you're friends with people who are aligned with you.
Okay.
Because the other side of that was a verse which was, do not be unequally yoked.
I thought that was about marriage.
But that's the thing. But it would also be used in the context of friendship. So when our teachers in the youth class were talking to us about friendship, because, back then, you think about the 90s and the early 2000s, peer pressure was a thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the church counteracted peer pressure by saying, also, don't be unequally yoked with sinners.
Okay. Okay.
Why have you got friends who are from the world?
Okay.
Of course, they're going to lead you astray, and you're going to start doing marijuana, and then it will lead to cocaine, and then before you know it, you will just be on the street.
Heroin.
Yeah, you know what I mean. You have to have good friends. You have to be equally yoked. So it comes from the term, like how you yoke oxen.
Okay.
Right? You kind of want both of them to be equal in size and weight so that they're both pulling together equally in the same direction.
Yeah.
You don't want one
ploughing and tilling the field.
This is it. So it's a farming reference, right?
Yeah.
You kind of want to be yoked with someone who's of equal weight and stature in Christ so that you're pulling together towards heaven is essentially what it boils down to, right?
Okay. I have so many thoughts, but not for this episode.
Listen.
Okay.
And then on the other side, you've got my mum who basically, call a spade, she's a traumatized person, right? Who's the head of women in our little community, right? So she's the women's fellowship leader.
The high priestess of the sisterhood, the church sisterhood.
Do you know what I mean? But she's in a position of leadership, but she's also a traumatized person who's probably got some depression. There was a lot of things going on there, right? So that put her in a position above the women. So her friendship with them, because of that power dynamic, it's like she couldn't really fully engage in the friendship on a peer to peer.
Yeah.
It was, I'm the leader, and so I've got to be an example, and I've got to lead from the front, and so on and so forth, right? And then when she did have friendships, because of her super giving nature, she was often taken advantage of.
Right.
So that warped her view on friendship. So she would always warn me about friends, like, don't get too close to people and don't let them know what's going on in your family life, and don't do this and don't do that, because people can weaponize that against you. They can do this. You don't know if they really have your best interests at heart, if you can really trust them, based on her experiences and based on what the church has said about don't be unequally yoked. So if I had friends in the non-church, so school or, on road, she'd be like, they're not your real friends. Don't see them as your real friends. These are just...
They're sinners. They're not good company for you.
Yeah. And if you are going to be friends with them, the goal has to be to get them saved.
Right. And that was said
That's
explicitly.
Your mission. Absolutely. Your mission is convert them or hold the friendship very loosely and lightly and don't take it too seriously. because you shouldn't be unequally yoked.
Okay.
But also you're supposed to be a representative of God on earth.
Right. Yeah.
To sinners.
So you can't also reject them equally. Do you know what I mean? But
Precisely.
there's some sort of like, you're part of us
Yeah.
or you're not part of us kind of hierarchy.
Exactly. So then love the sinner, hate the sin. Does that make sense? So that's the kind of weird conditioning that I have. The other thing in that community, that specific sect of Pentecostalism, was there were strict rules about what you do and what you don't do. So we didn't celebrate birthdays. We didn't celebrate Christmas. We didn't celebrate Easter. I mean, there were just so many rules. We didn't watch TV and stuff like that. So it meant that at the points where you would celebrate a friend, I couldn't celebrate friends.
Later when you were an adult and you had friendships? Or...
No, I'm talking about even as a kid, because as a kid, you know, people would go to each other's birthday parties. I couldn't go. And then you would give gifts to that person for their birthday and they would give gifts to you for your birthday, but you couldn't engage in that because it was a sin. Do you see what I mean? Christmas would come and you didn't give presents, and so therefore you didn't receive presents. So all of the things that you use to show yourself friendly, I didn't have access to. And I wasn't allowed to play out because, again, I wasn't allowed to. This is my mum's fear of just her fears about everything. She's quite a fearful person. But also, we weren't allowed to play out because do not be unequally yoked. You should not be playing with these children out there. So you can't celebrate your friends and they can't celebrate you. You can't play with them outside of the confines of school or church. So there's not much room to be a friend, if that makes sense.
I asked, had you been, like, do you consider yourself a good friend or have you ever been toxic? But it almost sounds like you weren't given a context to enable you to, like, that's almost not your fault. Like, how can you give something when you're not given the space to give it or the setting to give it? If you're not allowed to go to a friend's birthday party.
Yeah. But see, the problem is on the flip side, if you're an 8-year-old and you've invited me to your party and I don't turn up and there's no real explanation. And that's age 8, age 9, age 10. For that friend who doesn't have an understanding of the community I come from, you're just cold and you're not a good friend and you don't care and you don't celebrate me. So now you become, you are seen as toxic even though you're not.
Yeah, and not caring enough
and
or
not
not
caring
attuned enough.
Precisely. So even as I got older, I struggled to buy presents for people because I don't know how you buy presents for people. And then it became like a really big thing internally. I would really struggle because I had tried. Do you know what I mean? When I was in high school, I remember I had a friend called Dawn. And I think I maybe had a crush on her, if I'm being honest. And it was her birthday. And I decided to use some of my pocket money from the paper round to buy her a present. This is messed up. I went to the pharmacy and the pharmacy had these little teddy bears that were like neon pink, neon yellow or whatever. I remember thinking, I think she might like that. And it's from the pharmacy. It maybe cost £1 or whatever. So I bought that teddy. I took it to school to give. It was my first attempt at really trying to be part of the thing. That I wasn't really allowed
society.
to. Yeah, do you know what I mean? And I remember I gave it to her. I think it was still in the pharmacy bag as well. And I remember it was just like this weird, I remember a couple of friends just laughed. She was just like trying to be polite. And I just felt such shame because I knew in that moment that something about the gift wasn't appropriate or wasn't right.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then it put me off. And even now I struggle to buy gifts.
I was going to say, I've actually seen this early in our relationship. You would get so stressed when it came to birthdays or gift giving. And I'd be like, what are you stressed for? Like, I literally am not expecting anything, but anything you get me would be touching to me. Do you know what I mean? So hearing that story now, I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. And also, I feel kind of sad for you, little you, because I'm kind of like, oh, but that's a situation where you've been isolated from people because of a high control religious environment and then not been allowed to develop those things. And then you make this one gesture to bridge a gap, and to have that be made wrong is so painful. You know?
It really is. It really is.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
Yeah. So, And I imagine my friends on the other side of that, they just probably think you're cold and you're uptight and you're not giving and you're not
made an
generous.
effort
Do you know what I
or
mean?
something.
But then on the flip side, I was generous with my time.
Yeah.
I will give you all that, because again, I was taught that.
Yeah.
You give freely of your time, you spend time with people, quality time. I could spend a whole day with a friend.
Yeah.
Even up till today, if a friend says, "Can I come round for the day?" Yeah, come
you're
round.
so
I'll
good at
do
it.
the whole day. We'll go out for a walk, we'll talk, we'll eat, we'll all of that. I can give that. That comes naturally to me.
Yeah.
But not the other markers of friendship.
Yeah.
But this isn't about me. This is not about me. It's not
no,
about
but it's
me.
super interesting.
Yeah.
And I can not relate to that, but
Mm-hmm.
there is something about, when you're talking about those stories, there's so much we take for granted in friendships.
Mm-hmm.
For example, that gift giving is natural or easy, or that someone should just know how to show reciprocity or attunement or to meet a need. But I don't think we talk about the ways what our early conditioning shapes how we do friendship.
That's true.
You know what I'm saying? We talk about it in relationships. Did you have an attuned parent to know how to relate to your partner? But we never really unpack, I haven't, certainly, how does your family of origin shape how you do friendship?
Not until now.
Yeah.
I've never really unpacked it, to be honest.
Yeah.
I always knew the things my mum said about friendship, and I would try to challenge her with my younger sisters about that, because I would hear her say the same things to them that she said to me. And then I'd remember how that made me feel and how it affected my ability to connect with other people. And so I would always push back and say, but why?
Yeah.
Why can't you have a good friendship with you? Why can't you hang out with your friend, secular or otherwise? Why can't you go around their house and have a conversation? Why can't you have your little secrets between you? And I would try and challenge, you know what I mean? I don't know that it worked, but I know that the youngest of my two sisters is definitely way better as a friend. I can see it in her. The way she relates to her friends is like how I wished I could have at her age.
Yeah.
And so that makes me happy.
One thing as you're saying that I am reminded of is, because I moved around so much as a young person and I left home, one of the struggles I got into with friends later was I could easily not maintain contact and have this attitude of, oh, I'll pick it up wherever I left it or when I see you.
Mm-hmm.
Not like keep contact between seeing each other. Or I can also let go of things, but it's because leaving home and leaving my family of origin all the time to go to boarding school in a time when we didn't have mobile phones and constant connectivity, I had become adjusted to letting things go and just picking things up when I see you.
Mm-hmm.
But for a lot of people who've stayed close to their family of origin, that's just weird. Do you know what I mean? And so they experienced it as, you don't care about me. You're not willing to invest time in this relationship. You take for granted that we can just pick up where we left off. But that's the only thing I'd ever known.
Okay.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
That is the only thing that's changed now is we have WhatsApp. So I hear from my family all the time. From the age of 11 till 25, that was not the case. So I just didn't have that muscle of continued contact. And I didn't equate the depth of our relationship or our intimacy with the amount of time and contact.
Yeah, because you didn't need that, but actually they did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I thought I didn't need it just because I'd been made to become used to it.
Right.
Right?
Do you think that's changed now? Do you feel like you do need a more consistent? Have you been able to tap into that?
I've actively reworked on that, in that I know I had to spend a lot of time dismantling this idea that you just pick up where you left off. It is a feature with my friendships, but I realize that friendship now needs time. But it's also, I do have to remind myself that for me, time spent does not always equate to intimacy, whereas for many people it does. Particularly someone like you, where your love language is quality time.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Which I really value in our relationship. If we don't have that time, we can't form connection. Whereas for me, I could be close to people and care deeply about people and see them 3 times a year because that's all I saw my family.
Yeah, that's true. So I want to turn that question back on you. Have you ever been the toxic party in a friendship?
Yes.
I want all the juicy details.
I have, actually. It's very interesting reflecting on this particular chapter of my life. But I have this very strong memory of being about 15, 14, 15. At this point, I had been living in the UK. I'd spent 3 years in Belfast, and then I'd moved to the Midlands. And so I was far from my family and far from home, which was Botswana. And all of my really close friends that I grew up around and was really tightly bonded with, were they were still people who lived inside me and were very close, but we were no longer hanging out at each other's houses every weekend or, chilling on the block, just catching joke or whatever. And so for me, there had been this massive rupture from the age of 11 till now 15, 4 years later. And, the thing about being that sort of age, 14, 15, it's the sort of time when you start getting interested in sexual and romantic relationships.
The hormones are flowing.
The hormones are, and my hormones were just, you couldn't pay me to relive teenage years. My hormones were on crack. And the context for that awakening was I'm in an all-girls boarding school, not yet out to myself, let alone anybody else. And my preoccupation is primarily with boys, because that's what I'm socialized to like, and that's where some of my attractions lay at that time. And so I would go home in the holiday periods, and that would be the only time I had a chance to have contact with boys, which of course got you a lot of credit with girls at school when you went back, because many of them came from strict families. So it's not like they would have the holidays and then they would talk to boys. Only those of us who came from environments where that was possible would do that, right? That was not very many of us.
Okay.
So anyway, one holiday I went back home. One of my closest, dearest friends had told me she had a crush on this guy in her year group at school. I didn't think anything of it. Whatever happened, our paths ended up crossing that holiday.
Whose paths?
Me and the guy she had a crush on.
Okay.
I don't know how it happened. I have no recollection of that now. It might even have been in a hangout with her and a load of group of friends. But whatever happened, this guy got my number from someone else and started messaging me. And he wanted to speak on the phone. So I took, these kind of late night phone calls with this guy. And very quickly, he was like basically flirting and trying to initiate this relationship. And I remember being like, look, I can't do anything with you because my friend has a crush on you.
Okay.
And she's like
That's
my
quite noble.
closest friend. I mean, not when what follows.
Okay.
And he was like, well, I don't have a crush on this friend, and I'm interested in you. So you should be able to do whatever you want. And I
Okay.
remember feeling, awkward I wish I could make myself sound more noble, but probably for about 48 hours, I did feel uncomfortable. So I got to the point where I was like, well, I guess if nothing's going to happen there, then I'm a free agent to do whatever I want.
Yep.
And so pretty quickly, this became my 15-year-old holiday fling. Now, my friend did not react well to this at all, but I think in hindsight, she hid her bad reaction and her hurt from me. I can just tell, looking back at it as an adult, this really, really was deeply hurtful for her, particularly because her own family life was going through some really difficult things. And, in a way, I look back at it now, and it was like, that is the girl code. You do not, nothing had happened between them. They'd never dated or anything, but she had a crush, a professed crush. You do not get with the person your friend is interested in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, you know what I mean? Whatever happened, we rode that out as a friendship. And probably because she gave me so much grace, we are to this day still friends. And I think what happened was she sought solace in the counsel and talking with another male school peer who she had, who it turns out she then ended up in a relationship with and is now married to. So they were like 15, 16 when they got together, and they're still together all of these years later. But I don't know, it's the like, talking of the sisterhood, it's the thing you do not do, right? You do not get with someone your friend has been or is interested in. And it was just awful.
Why do you think she didn't talk to you about the hurt that she might have been feeling?
It's a very good question.
Not sure.
I think it's such an uncomfortable conversation because technically, if nothing's happened between you and that person, it's a bit of a blurry line.
Yeah.
So she maybe had felt like, how would she name it?
Yeah.
It's also possible that with all that was going on in her family life at the time, she just didn't
Didn't have
have
the
the freaking
headspace.
energy
Yeah.
or headspace to raise what should have been a basic in her head. Like, you just don't cross that line.
Yeah.
I would actually have to ask her, which would be taking her back to a difficult place potentially. I mean, we've all grown up, so she might be like, whatever. But I think that is a really core time. And that would be quite a betrayal. And I've always sort of had this feeling that her husband, who's absolutely lovely, sort of wondered how good a friend I am or could be to her, or what kind of, like, felt protective of her.
You felt that at the time?
No,
Or just
even now to
Oh,
this
really?
day, because it
Okay.
was such a formative period in our lives, and it
Yeah.
was the way he came to probably know me, and it was such a
Mm.
critic. As I look back at it as an adult now, it was a really formative period in her family life years and stuff that was going on, and then your friend exercises this betrayal, which appears from the outside very, very selfish, and was in many ways very, very selfish.
Mm.
And maybe because of what was going on in her family life, she just also couldn't bear to lose a friend that was so close and who was like family.
Yeah.
That could be another reason she didn't bring it up, that the rupture was so great. I mean, I have a vague memory we talked about it, but I don't remember the detail of it. And I don't know, I know for a fact I would not have had the language to fully own that or talk it through or meet her where she was needed. And I suspect that because of our age was why I got so much grace.
Mm.
If she had been older and had better boundaries, I suspect I would not have had that grace, because it would have been completely fair for that relationship to unravel
Yeah.
as a consequence.
Yeah. You said it at the start of the story that you
Mm,
just feel like a lot of shame.
mm.
Why? Where does that come from? What's the shame relating to? It might sound like an obvious question, but I am curious about where that's coming from.
I mean, in this moment, as I'm recounting it, I'm not feeling the like shame attack as when I
Okay.
was remembering it the other day.
Right.
But when I was remembering it the other day, it's just like, that is a bad friend move. And I remember realizing at some moment that, oh, I've really hurt this person. And, no one wants to hurt someone they care about.
Yeah.
So I'm someone who thinks of, particularly today, like, I try to think about and care for it was quite uncharacteristic of me in a way,
Mm.
because I'm normally quite an empathetic person who will often think about, okay, where's this person? How are they feeling? And, if I'm honest, I think some of the shame when I was thinking about it, I was like, why did I do that? Right? What on earth made me do that? And as I see it now as an adult, I think I was very traumatized. I had left home
Young.
super young. I felt disconnected from all my friends and family.
Mm-hmm.
I had gone to live this life in England that everyone thought was wonderful. You're
Yeah.
getting educated in Britain. What do
Yeah.
you have
The
to
land of
complain?
milk and
Yeah,
honey.
everything must be great. But meanwhile, I wasn't in a good situation in terms of bullying at school. I had kind of become estranged from my family there. There were so many painful things going on, not least being the only black child in your class or in your school and having nothing. And weirdly, the result of all that was developing eating disorders for me
Mm-hmm.
and painfully low self-esteem and self-contempt. And I think there was just this really heady mix of, my hormones are on fire, there are boys are interested in me, and suddenly you're getting this validation and attention and supply, and you're on holiday and a fling, and maybe you'll get a story that you go back with. Not that I remember thinking about it as a story, like, I
Mm-hmm.
genuinely was interested in the person that I was dating at that time. Not a great match, but I genuinely was. It wasn't like I was just doing it to,
Mm-hmm.
I
For the
was
kicks.
genuinely
Yeah.
interested. But it was filling this hole, and my self-esteem was so poor that seemed to supersede my capacity to be a good friend.
Yeah.
So I think that is a really kind of, it's shameful because for me, I did not meet the basic bar or expectation of how you behave in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't show up properly. And also I probably didn't see her pain and the things she was going through, which I couldn't relate to because I was so embroiled in my own.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lesson in there about, well, I kind of, going back to your story of Belinda last week, if you have a friend around you who's that traumatized and doesn't have help and has that low self-esteem, there is a risk to you.
That's true.
Potentially,
There
and your
is.
safety.
Absolutely.
And you can repair it if you have a friend that gives you grace, but it's not a given that you should get that grace.
That's true.
Yeah. And
also, if you give that grace, it's not a given that they will be able to do anything useful or meaningful with that grace.
Absolutely not.
If they haven't done their own internal work.
Precisely. Or they don't have the context to do their internal work.
Exactly.
I mean, I think the reason I do feel sad. I feel in this moment, now I'm retelling it, you maybe could tell I got a bit emotional just reliving that story and how I wish I'd been a better friend. The shame that I felt when I just remembered the story for the first time the other day was, I think I was beating myself up and self-flagellating because I didn't meet my own bar.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the intervening couple of days, I've been like, oh, but as an adult, I have some compassion for my young self.
Yeah.
And I feel like I deserved adults who could have helped me make certain transitions.
Yeah.
And maybe not contributed to like my self-esteem suffering and not needing to get validation in all of those ways. But as it was, I kind of left and had no one.
Yes.
So of course it's going to play out in this really toxic way. But I do have some compassion for the young version of me that didn't get that met. But I don't think it excused my behavior towards my friend.
Yeah. And I think that's an important observation to make. And the question that's come into my mind is, have you spoken to that friend since at any point or even as adults?
About the issue?
Yeah, about that moment.
Do you know, I think whatever happened at the time, and I don't remember the nature of the conversation, it got left there. And I
Okay.
think that's why I had so many feelings. I feel like there was some discussion about it, probably not enough discussion, but I've never raised it.
Okay.
And maybe I should.
Okay.
Maybe I should actually go back to her.
Yeah.
And
does it feel like a
ask
conversation
her.
you want to have then?
I mean, I just don't know how it would land. Would it be, is me not wanting to have it about self-preservation? I don't want to have to relive it or be accountable.
Mhm.
Or is it that I'd be bringing up something that she's long forgotten? I think it's such a significant thing that I can't see how it didn't fundamentally alter the relationship. I think she would have trusted me a little bit less. But at the same time, we've been through loads since, I've seen her through loss. We've seen each other through different phases. She's seen me through divorce. It's not like we were when we were kids because we were always around each other, but she's someone I see as a sister. I love her dearly.
Yeah.
And I should be able to have that conversation, and maybe I will, and I'll report back in a future episode.
Yeah. I would be interested for you to have that conversation because I think your friendship with her is so beautiful. And I loved when we spent time with them last year, 2024. And if there is a way for you to have that conversation, I think it's something that I think would actually be beneficial. Even while I have said that, it's difficult for friendships to be repaired exactly the same as they were before the problem. But I think it's nice sometimes to just have, even if it's a little bit of closure and understanding. I think so, but it's your
That's
friendship.
very interesting. Well, I'll take that from you because I think you're quite good at tackling things head on, and I've learned a lot from you. And I think those are some of the skills I've learned in romantic and friendships type relationships is you have to learn to communicate. And
Yes.
I didn't always get the most explicit models of communication in my family of origin.
Yeah.
So sometimes it isn't bad to just kind of go back and say,
this thing happened.
We talked about it at the time. I don't really remember the conversation.
Yeah.
How do you think it affected
Yeah.
us or you?
Yeah.
Or, how do you see it?
Yeah. Agreed.
So in the run-up to this episode, I came across a post by Nedra Tawwab, the therapist.
Yeah.
She's brilliant. And she did this whole reel on basically how she had been ghosted by a friend. And it was really super interesting because she was saying people are allowed to leave. And actually, it takes a lot of maturity to end a relationship.
It's true.
Or to have someone break up with you, which is a bit of a contrast to what Love at Jallow said, which is like maybe it's avoidance sometimes.
Yeah.
But I thought
you need both sides, don't you?
You do. And I think the point she was making was ghosting is what the problem is. If you choose to end a relationship, you don't actually owe anyone an explanation, but is ghosting a thing that could be considered toxic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was curious about you and whether you have ever walked away from a friendship without any explanation, aka ghosted someone.
Yes, I have.
Nope.
I have. I've done it a couple of times. For those people who haven't listened to last week's episode, the Love It Jallow reference that Tamanda just used was the beginning of that episode. And in that, Love It Jallow basically said that ghosting, walking away from a friendship can often be a sign of someone being avoidant, not wanting to have the difficult conversations, get into the nitty-gritty and the messy of friendship repair. Essentially.
Yeah.
So that's where that comes from. But in answer to your question, I've definitely ghosted. And for me, when I've ghosted, it's usually based on seeing the pattern of a person. And because I didn't pay attention to the pattern of my friend Belinda, and that friendship lasted over 20 years and resulted in the chaos that it was, jealousy,
as
envy,
described
all
last
of that.
episode.
Yeah, as described in the last episode. My calculation was a bit like Maya Angelou said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Except that I had a few more chances on top of that. So it's not just the first time, but I will look at the pattern of a thing and then I'll make my decision as to, is this a friendship that I want to keep and sustain or not? Sometimes I might have a conversation and try and repair. And I've done that a few times. I had a friend who basically just disappeared, reappeared. And I tried. And then I came out to that person and they were kind of like, yeah, you know, my Catholic, whatever, you know, I don't believe that that's a valid lifestyle, in quotes. I'm against homosexuality, this, that, and the other. And I thought to myself, well, based on the pattern of this person's behavior, as a friend, they haven't really shown up for me in the ways that I want to be shown up for. And then on top of that, your religion is against who I am. I'm not going to turn up to you in bits and edit myself. So there's no point.
Yeah.
And at that point, I didn't even want to have a conversation. I just stopped talking. I saw their text, didn't reply, saw messages, didn't reply. I was just like, there's no point. I don't want to have the conversation. This is not a reciprocal friendship.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
you can never be, So, but do you consider that in that situation, be toxic?
To that person, maybe they might see it as toxic.
Okay.
And to other people watching, they might consider that toxic because maybe I should have said to the person straight up, I feel like you've done this, this, and this. I don't believe your beliefs align with who I am. And so there should have been a closure conversation at the very least.
Okay.
Maybe. That's what I would say. But how about yourself? Have you ever ghosted?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so first of all, that's why I asked, like, is that actually toxic? Because for me, I'm the kind of person, my toxic trait, if you will, is like, when I'm done, I'm done.
Yeah.
Right? And
I like it though, I have to say.
Really? Why?
I wish I had a bit more of that.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't have wasted so many years on so many idiots. I'm sorry to say it, but people who just weren't, I wouldn't have wasted so many years on people who just weren't good friends.
Yeah.
I've lost a lot of time.
I mean, I must say, when I heard your Belinda story on the last episode, I was like, wow, I would not have made that many attempts. And maybe this is where my childhood condition of leaving home and moving on, I don't think it's always a good thing, but I can let go of things. Including relationships, because I've been forced to let go of relationships so many times, including ones I've loved, because my school closed and I needed to move to another place. I was sent abroad here, or the end of the holidays come, you now need to go back to school. So letting go is something that I became extremely practiced at. And the idea of that relationships change and shift constantly was something, maybe you could say I normalized inconsistency. That's the downside to it. But it means that if I see particularly things that I consider to be harmful, difficult, or I don't believe that a conversation will resolve those things because they're so fundamental, I will, I guess, practice discernment and step away. And there are times when I think that's not toxic. Right? I think it's just an exercise in emotional maturity, because I feel like there's a length of time you walk on this earth and you see these patterns, and like, okay, I've been in this scenario before. I've tried to have a conversation before 2 or 3 times, and I've seen it play out in X, Y, and Z ways. Something as fundamental as whether your friend understands your sexuality as legitimate or sinful is actually a really big thing in a friendship.
That's
Because
true.
even though we can say, we don't have to be the same, we don't have to agree, you're right that it requires you to edit a bit, or cut out parts of yourself, or accept that someone sees you as fundamentally flawed. And for me, that's if that's what you want to, that's your belief system, that's fine. But I don't need to put myself around that, because at some level there's a judgment of who I am.
Yeah.
And I
And you're
think
positioning yourself as superior.
above.
Yeah.
And for me, I come down to values. Now, if my values are about equality or equity, or us being equal and seeing all of each other and being able to be truthful, that's fine, but only if that doesn't denigrate me, or doesn't, if I have to, what happens in a scenario where you've now got in a relationship breakup? Are you going to bring it to that person who already thinks the relationship was sinful and a lifestyle choice to begin with?
Yeah.
Or when you then show them your vulnerable side, are they going to take it as evidence that, yep, see, it was sinful, you were living in sin, and this is what happens?
Yep.
Do you see what I'm saying? So can you even be your vulnerable self without experiencing judgment?
There you go.
So, to me, I don't consider that toxic. I consider that discernment. However, I would say I can think of 2 big examples where I've ghosted. The first one was with a friend, I'm going to use a pseudonym, called Nadine.
Okay.
Right? And a little bit like your friendship with Belinda, me and Nadine became intense friends in 6th form. And like I found with many female friendships that I had in that sort of age, it was almost had a romantic quality to it, a flirtatious quality. It was intense. It was probably the only person I looked at as a best friend in my entire life. I've always been in groups of friends, not had a best friend sort of thing. And she was the kind of person who felt like family. In my head, the story I told of this relationship is, okay, I live the other side of the world from my family. There wasn't as much connectivity, as I said, at that time with mobile phones. The people you live with in school, and she was one of them, are basically your family.
Yeah.
And so it was one of those relationships that I thought, it's going to last forever. It never occurred to me that that relationship wouldn't exist. And so from the age of 16 up until, I would say, our early 30s, we were fairly inseparable. We were always catching up, always talking, always going through these sort of milestones. However, one thing I think that was there really early on in that relationship were a bunch of imbalances. I think she was a very confident person, or at least presented that way. Actually, I think I had quite low self-esteem. I think I probably presented as confident, but I don't think I was. I think I kind of looked up to her. I did look up to her in a way, maybe even pedestaled her, which is not a good basis for a friendship either.
True.
And I think there were a whole bunch of social reasons for that. It was classed, there were all sorts of things going on. But on another level, there were things I didn't like which I read certain behaviors in her as a bit snobby, blah, blah, blah. But we had, what I liked about our relationship is that even those things, we were very honest with each other. We were always direct, and we teased each other about our differences or about those kinds of things. Where it started to become a problem was, like, as we left school, if we'd make plans to meet up and she would turn up an hour or two late. I'm someone who finds that really hard.
I can't.
I feel disrespected. I feel like my time is taken for granted. I feel like I've made an effort to be here and do the things, and you haven't. And actually being in a school environment together masked over those things. And going back to seeing friends as family, it made her not reliable to me. And I probably needed reliability as somebody who had a lot of inconsistency in the relationship. So it made this like very gaping difference in us obvious. I say I'm going to do something, I do it. I show up, I turn up, and I turn up when I say I'm going to turn up. And then it played out in a whole bunch of other ways, like money was less of an object to her than it was for me. So if we would be making plans as friend groups, for me to make an effort to be at something would cost me a lot of money and come at quite a sacrifice because I didn't have a lot of spare money. Whereas for her, it was quite normal. She was fairly wealthy. And so it didn't come at a sacrifice. So she would make a plan and I would do all this kind of self-sacrificing and saving money to attend or do a thing. And then I could make a plan for something I wanted to do. And she just would pull out at last minute or not attend.
Oh.
And it wasn't a thing for her because I think the stakes weren't so high for her. For her, it was just, yeah, we're going to do this thing. I'll be there or I won't be there. Whereas for me, being there was such an investment, not just of my time, but of money I didn't really easily have. That would have been the difference between paying rent or something, right?
Yeah.
Or how much food, maybe not paying rent, but how much food can I eat that month? Or what's my budget for food that month, right? And I think all of this came to a head around the time we both got married. And the biggest mistake I made was that for all those years when those little slights happened, I may have raised them, but I raised them in kind of, ugh, are you not going to be late again, or teasing ways, but I never really brought them as real issues.
Yeah.
So they got submerged and pushed down because I lacked communication skills. And then they built up into resentment
Yeah.
over time.
Yeah.
Basically, all these issues that we had came to a head about the time we got married. And we both got married within a year and a half period. And there was lots going on in each of our lives that we had no mechanism for communicating around. The long and short of it was, for various reasons that were legitimate, she wasn't able to be present for me at a certain time. And because I was so hurt by it, I didn't even know how to handle it. I didn't know how to communicate the hurt. I didn't feel legitimate in communicating a hurt when so much was going on in her life.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did was just completely stop communicating with her.
Right.
And that, I think, was toxic. I think it was definitely toxic because it didn't give her a chance to, it didn't give either of us a chance to talk through what was legitimate grievances and what each of us needed and figure it out. You know, as it happened, probably 2 years after no talking, we did get back together and we met up and we had dinner and we actually managed to have the conversation. And I had actually thought she didn't give a shit about me, really.
Mm-hmm.
That because of certain things like the time thing and the reliability thing, I thought that meant she didn't give a shit about me. But actually, she was there in front of me crying and saying she was just so consumed by the loss of this relationship over the last 2 years. And I had seen no evidence of it. Meanwhile, she probably thought, I didn't give a shit, you know? And even as I look back, that's probably one of the first times in a relationship I've attempted, in a friendship, where I've had to do real repair and where we've really, really worked through stuff. And I think I probably still didn't have enough language for it. But we kind of did it and we kind of made it work, at least for a while.
Okay, so at least for a while.
Yeah.
So what does that mean today? Where are you guys at?
it's so interesting because I felt that we had done a lot to repair, and we had that big conversation, and then I went and spent a bit of time with her. I actually stayed with her over a period, and I was like, "Oh, wow." It really was like, "Oh, wow, you really can repair a friendship." I didn't think that was possible after it had gone wrong, or so horribly wrong. And then I realized last year, do you remember in the run up to my 40th?
Yes.
I was like, "Okay, there's only a very small handful of people I want to be there." And she was one of them. And I reached out and sent her an invite, like doing a little celebration in London. "Would you like to come? And, is your husband free to come? Blah, blah, blah." And I got no response. And then I looked back at the messages and I was like, wow, I've done the reaching out the last 3 times before this, and I've had no reply. And I was like, oh shit, maybe she's ghosted. Maybe she's done.
Mm.
And then I looked at the ones even before that and I was like, oh, she's replied, but I'm still doing all the labor and all the emotional heavy
So you're
lifting.
looking at the pattern.
I started looking at and it was there plain to see. It wasn't like I was overreading it. And I thought, wow. And so I had this second burst of grief. It was like I was grieving the relationship for a second time. And I think I spoke to you about it at the time because I was like, I thought I'd grieved this already once and you'd think it would be easier. And in some ways it is a little bit easier, but I'm also so confused. You know what I mean? And then there was another part of me that's like, is there something going on in her life?
Yeah.
Is everyone
Is she
okay?
okay?
Are her family okay? I don't know how to ask that because there's no response to these other things. She's also incredibly busy, has a very different life to me, working, has kids. So then it's like, do I have unreasonable or different expectations because my life is different? So in answer to your question, I think even the fact that when that rupture is there, I don't trust, or my default is, oh, it's probably broken, says something about what happens. Like repair should increase trust,
Yeah.
right? If it's done well and if it's sustained. But
Yeah.
if it hasn't happened and then that rupture happens and you're like, oh shit, that tells me something.
Yeah. It comes back to that broken bone thing, isn't it? Like you break a bone in your body and they can set it and repair it. And this is as someone who's had 3 surgeries on my knee, it's repaired and it is strong. I remember the physio saying to me, it's probably stronger now than before, but you've lost trust in it because your knee has failed you
Yeah.
in the most painful way possible. And so
And it's something that anchors you. It
it
was so
anchors you.
central
Yeah.
that you have to find new ways to live
Yeah.
in the absence of your knee working properly.
Yeah.
And the
You
friendship is the same.
overcompensate in certain ways and you don't put as much force into the knee as you used to. You don't jump the same way.
Yeah.
You land slightly differently. And I think it's the same thing in a friendship is that yes, it's repaired. And yes, maybe greater trust, maybe because you've had the deep conversation. But then once you're put into a stressful situation, you don't put as much force into the friendship as you would have because you're like, oh, maybe can it tolerate it? Will it bring up this? It's like these little niggles,
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a perfect analogy, honestly. And like, I don't have any ill will or bad feeling. But, the other thing that I think happens is if you've gone a long time with that person that was so important to you and who you love dearly, you sort of learn to live without them and you learn it's possible when you maybe didn't know.
Yeah.
And as hard as that is, you're reminded of that. So the stakes, the investment to repair can be also lower. And then you look at things with the benefit of hindsight and experience and you sort of say, well, if I look at the trajectory of the relationship and I can look back to some of the early red flags, maybe it was always fundamentally flawed and this was just a sort of lesson, but a beautiful one in many places. Or maybe if I can look back at the friendship and see the person I am today versus the person I was and they were when I met them, I can realize I've changed.
Yeah.
I'm an entirely different person. By the time we did repair, and then the years that followed, I was married to a man, then divorced, then come out and married to a woman. Who knows how a person makes sense of that as well? Do I even know this person? I've never had, a level of deep enough conversation to understand how they relate to that. So maybe you're just different people.
Yeah.
And I think friendships go through seasons as well. Like, there are people I know that I met at a certain stage, and they are some of my best friends because we share these core memories. If you met them later in life, would they have automatically been a person I become friends with? I
Yeah.
don't know that I would
Yeah,
sometimes. I mean, I may treasure them deeply and I love them like family, but it's like, oh, would we actually be friends if we met? I don't know. So
Yeah.
yeah, like I said, the part of me that knows how to let go, maybe it's a toxic trait, but sometimes when I'm done, I'm kind of done.
Yeah. I think one of the questions that kept coming back for us was, how would our friends narrate our friendship and our breakups? Because we've been talking over the last 2 episodes about our perspective and how maybe we've been hurt or how we've caused some hurt, and our struggles with communication or not the right communication and all of this stuff. But obviously there's another person. It takes two to tango, right? So I'm very curious for you, when you think about Nadine, how do you think she would narrate? You've obviously had a chance to have some repair with her, so she's probably given you some insights, but what do you take from that? How would she narrate your friendship and the breakup and possibly the repair?
Yeah, this is interesting. So I think Nadine, I have an insight into how she narrated it at the point we did our repair conversations, right?
Okay.
And at that time, I think she was devastated, didn't understand why I had suddenly removed myself, probably didn't understand why it had happened at the moment because of things that were happening in her life that she may have needed me the most. And there was stuff I learned at that time that I didn't know, I wasn't privy to, about what was going on for her. But the main thing I remember her reiterating to me in that conversation was, if you felt all these things over all these years, why didn't you just communicate? Like, she probably would narrate the rupture as a failure of communication on my part.
On your part?
Yeah.
But she also didn't communicate.
But she didn't have a problem with things as they were. I was the one that had a problem with things as they were.
That makes sense.
And so for her, she was just living her life.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, if the sacrifice or the investment in the relationship isn't the same, it's like, okay, in a way, it was kind of like, let's say the things where it costs a lot of money for me to go to something and less for her. It's like a kind of, you could say it's a kind of privilege. If money's not an object to you, why would you clock that this is hard for the person? Okay, timekeeping, she can accept, but her point was communicate. On some level, I felt like I had communicated, but I don't think I'd communicated clearly enough, or the ways that I would do today as a more mature person who's done a lot more work.
But you're also asking someone with a lesser amount of money to say to you, I don't have as much money as you and I can't afford to do these things.
The thing about privilege is it's invisible to you.
No, but what I'm saying is that you're asking someone with less money to come to you and say, I don't have as much money. That's a difficult thing to do. Money's already a tricky subject to talk about as it is. Never mind, I'm now going to come to you and say, I can't afford this. I can't do this because I don't have as much money as you. And then now it creates this awkward conversation where now this person who has all the money is like, oh shit, so now do I adjust my lifestyle for you? And then you're like feeling awkward because you've had to say this thing about your lack. I don't know. That's not an easy thing to ask someone to communicate,
It's not. And I think she probably said it in relation to other aspects or things that I had issues with rather than that. Okay. And I'm not sure in hindsight how much I would have gone into detail with her about it, because as you say, it's a very tricky thing.
Yeah.
And I learned very young not to bring up money with my peers because I realized we were in different positions and brackets and shame. And I do actually remember one friend, In fact, I think it was this friend in school saying something along the lines of like, oh no, you just can't date people or be with people who are in a different class bracket to you because it just doesn't work. People are just, and that I found like preposterous. But also maybe there's a truth to it, to how difficult it can be.
It can.
Right? Because if I can't do things you take for granted or vice versa, that's a massive power imbalance.
Absolutely.
And in a lot of relationships, you look for equity. But then at the same time, I have plenty of other friends who have much more. And one thing that I see in those friendships is deep attunement. So they might never say anything, but I can tell, okay, they've thought that this might not be so affordable for them. Or you can see that they've put that thought in. I can see that in a lot of my friendships, right? People who are just deeply attuned to where you are and what people need. And because they're curious enough about your life, they would understand the implications of a thing, So anyway, I think she would have narrated it as I didn't communicate well enough. I do not know how she would narrate it in this later phase after I thought we'd repaired and there's no messages. I mean, that was the thing that was so destabilizing, is like, oh, if this relationship is kind of done, it's happened via a slow fade.
Yeah.
It didn't happen, nothing had to happen. It might just be that A, she's too busy, or if there is a problem, it's just like, it's not worth it for me to communicate this. And I've been there.
Yeah, I've been there.
And it was what it was at its time and I appreciate it, but it's kind of run its course.
Yeah.
So that would be one. What about you? How do you think?
So my friend Belinda, how would she narrate it? I think she might say that I was too focused on work, obsessed with work, maybe. Probably say that maybe I wasn't attentive enough. Maybe uptight.
Sorry, but I just side-eyed that because I was like, wow, this would be a great story in her head and very one-sided. Go on.
I can imagine that's maybe what she thought, because in the moment when she revealed her romantic affection, I didn't do that thing of being like really, what's the word, like sort of soppy, like, oh my God, welcome to the queer family. Or I didn't do all of that. It was just more like,
oh, there's pamphlets.
yeah. Well, yeah, it was more like, well, I've got a film to shoot. This is a massive revelation.
Yeah.
I'm going to need time to process.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best that I can do at this moment emotionally.
Yeah.
And, you know what I mean? So I imagine she might perceive that as cold and not loving enough or understanding enough, or taking the time to show empathy and compassion and understanding in that moment and have like a deep conversation. So I can see how she might have perceived that, if that makes sense. The rest of it, I just don't get, in terms of her jealousy and her envy and all of that sort of stuff. I just don't get, and I don't know how you narrate that from her side, honestly. It'd have to come from her.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's incredibly generous that you're able to even come in. I think that it is, I get coming out is a huge deal, and to come out to your best friend, maybe she would have looked for some sort of reciprocity
for when
you came out to her.
And she was there for me.
However, she did come out to you in a very different scenario and also expressed an attraction to you when you were in a relationship. So that fundamentally, you can't expect that same person to hold that and to hold it in the same way.
Yeah.
Like I just think that that's messy as fuck.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it's a tricky one. I think adult friendships, I mean, in a nutshell, where does this leave us as we wrap up this two-parter on adult friendships?
One of the things I'm taking away from this two-parter is friendships are a site of learning. We learn so much in friendships.
Yeah.
That often gets overlooked and not given space.
The world, people, so much.
Yeah. We benefit from the grace of good friends.
Yeah.
People who allow us to make mistakes, to apologise, to work through things. We learn the limits of friendship based on the boundaries that other people create for us, or hitting our own limits of what's tolerable.
Yep.
And in the right ones, there's so much nourishment and so much to gain. And I think for me, the main thing is a reminder of how much you actually need to invest to have relationships and friendships that are nourishing.
Yep.
And how, you always describe our relationship or our romantic relationship as being like an egg.
Yeah.
And you talk about how fragile it is. And I think friendships are the same. They require nurturing, and they can be extremely resilient, but also extremely fragile by not showing up enough, by not being curious, by not being attuned, by not making space to communicate and work through things. And I think I'm going to start thinking about my friendships in a more therapeutic sense going forward because of this conversation.
Yeah. I hope that I am a good friend to the friends that I have. In this world that we're in, it is so overwhelming with all the different social medias and, like I think about WhatsApp, which is my primary method of communication with my friends. But that's so overwhelming because people just text you. And then another text comes and another thing and another thing. And sometimes trying to keep on top of it is really, really difficult. And so sometimes I find that I'm not responding as much to my friends as I should be. And I feel bad about that. But it's like I don't have the psychological bandwidth to handle all of the constant communication on top of the business communication and the workload. And then obviously I'm in a relationship and that requires intentionality. And it's like you can't be intentional to everyone all the time. And I think that's the thing that I really struggle with, is that I'm a quality time person and I don't feel like I'm able to give the quality time to my friends.
Yep.
And I wish that I could. And I guess my hope is that I will find a way to balance all of the things.
Yeah.
But currently I am just so overwhelmed that I struggle.
Here. And I think that could be a whole episode in itself, because
Yeah.
I suspect I relate to that so hard. And I suspect there are a ton of people. Like, how does anyone keep on top of or hold space and do all the things we want to invest in friendships in this moment? It's so overwhelming.
It is.
Even with people you adore and who are like, just turn up as you are. You don't need to be, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's hard.
It's hard.
It's hard. And that's where the grace comes in.
Yeah, that's where we all have to give each other grace,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think I want to be a better friend. I want to be a more intentional friend. And I want to find a way to give the quality time that my friends deserve.
Yeah.
That's what I would take away.
That's lovely.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. That's all we have time for on Rigour and Flow this week. I am curious for you out there. Have you ever been a toxic friend? Have you ever ghosted anyone? How would your friends describe you as a friend? And do you consider yourself to be a good friend? As always, please like, subscribe, share, rate, leave a review. We now have a way for you to support the show financially with our Buy Me a Coffee. So the link is in the description. If you can do a monthly subscription, amazing. If it's a one-off payment, that would be amazing as well. If you can't, don't worry. You'll always get the same show. But what we would ask is for you to share the show with someone you think would benefit from what we talk about on Rigour and Flow. Is there anything else you want to add before we sign off?
Just thank you, and see you next week.
See you next week.